Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get started again. So if you're just outside, filter back into the room now. We want to start talking a little bit about the annual campaign calendar. And in a minute or two, I'm going to take you through sort of month by month what to do in your PCFO role primarily as the campaign is going. So every year, OPM publishes a campaign calendar of events. And you can get that at the OPM website, opm.gov/CFC. And that that calendar contains a detailed list of things that need to happen and when they need to happen by. So it's a great idea for you to take that calendar and put it into your Outlook calendar or whatever calendar you use to make sure that you're meeting those deadlines, because it's really important that those deadlines are met. And so I'll be giving you specific examples in a minute, so don't worry. Part of your internal campaign calendar, though, is to set up a regular time for your LFCC to come together and meet. And how often your LFCC meets really is going to vary from campaign to campaign, depending on the needs of your campaign and the availability of your LFCC members. Just to give you an example, however, our LFCC meets on a quarterly basis. So every 3 months, we're convening, and what we do at those meetings is different depending on what time, when in the calendar cycle we fall. So we'll give you some examples of that. Also, to arrange for your LFCC subcommittee meetings. Now, this is not, having subcommittees to your LFCC is not something that is required by the recommendations, but I'm going to suggest it to you as a best practice to sort of subdivide your LFCC into different working groups. So in our campaign, we subdivide into an eligibility committee, promotions and awards committee, and an events committee. So we try to get, and that doesn't mean that every member of those subcommittees has to be an LFCC member, but especially for the eligibility committee, the chair of that committee should be a member of the LFCC, and you should have LFCC members that are reviewing charity applications. Now, we also deputize and enlist federal employee volunteers to assist in that process, and they're eligible to do so, but it is your LFCC that is ultimately responsible for the eligibility of making decisions on eligibility for the charities that apply. So I recommend to you as a best practice to subdivide your LFCC into subcommittees and to have a member of the LFCC chair each one of those committees, because it's really going to help them as you meet back together as a full LFCC quarterly or however often you meet. Those people will be able to report to the LFCC what is taking place for each one of those functions. And then you should maintain a PCFO calendar of events to help keep you on track, making sure that you're doing what needs to be done at any given point in the year. So just on the next slide here, what I've done is I have, and I'm sorry, I know it's really too small to read, but I'm only putting up here as an example. This is my Intermountain CFC internal calendar of events. And this is what I use to help keep me on track, knowing what I'm supposed to be doing during the year. And the way I've done this is anytime there is an item that comes from the OPM calendar of events with an OPM mandated deadline, I bold that line item. And then I've got a column to the right that is reminding me who's responsible for making sure this happens, whether it's the LFCC or the PCFO, and then another column that shows when that was actually completed. And if it's a bold item, it better be done by the date that is mandated. And that's something that I present to my LFCC every time we meet, so they can see, what actions have taken and when they were completed by. So I'd recommend that you set something up similar to this for your own PCFO. And if you would like to borrow ours as a template, I'd be happy to share that. Just send me an email. And someone was asking me earlier if you're interested. My contact information is at our website, intermountaincfc.org. And I'd be happy to talk to any of you at any time. Okay, I'm going to turn this time over to Catherine.
Isn't Bruce great? He's even with this presentation, he's doing the heavy lifting, and so he's going to talk for a long time. And although this is CFC 101, I probably wouldn't have come to this session because I think I know it all. But I've learned a lot, so I'm really grateful that I was here to listen to Bruce and get some best practices from him. So you guys are really lucky to have him as a co-presenter, and definitely take him up on his offer to follow up and share some best practices in his template and whatnot. So as I mentioned earlier, the LFCC, they're very busy, so the earlier you can identify the dates, the better you will get, the better attended the meetings will be. Also, as I mentioned earlier, the idea of alternate meeting options, Adobe Connect or GoToMeeting or phone is good. Also sending ahead the read-ahead material. And Bruce mentioned earlier about the completeness review that they do for the applications. And I've worked with some PCFOs that don't do that. And they give that responsibility to the LFCC. And, that's just really very time-consuming. And, so just in general, the more the PCFO can be respectful of the LFCC's time. And although it's a requirement that federal employees review and approve the applications, that completeness review is one way you can keep your LFCC engaged, because if they have to come to a meeting and do a lot of tedious stuff over and over and over, that's when they get disengaged and they stop coming to the meetings. So just the more you can make the meetings productive, the better. And quarterly is a good time frame to have them. I did want to say a little bit more about the application review process. It's in the calendar, but one of the things that we've done is some campaigns sort of hold on to that with just the LFCC members. And as I've mentioned, the LFCC members are very busy. But we ended up opening it up to some of our leadership development candidates in different agencies, and again, touted it as an opportunity for them to learn something new, develop some leadership skills. And it also is a great way to market the campaign. What I found is that when the employees are engaged in reviewing the applications, they really see firsthand how well the charitable organizations are vetted, and then they tell a friend, and then they tell a friend, and then they tell a friend. And the LFCC still has the final signature approval. So what we do is we have the applications reviewed by 2 federal employees, and then the LFCC does the final, LFCC member in the room, or multiple LFCC members do the final review. But definitely think about that when you're working out your schedule, is enough lead time to recruit some individuals at federal agency employees that might not already be engaged with the CFC, but recruiting them to come help review the applications is another way to engage them. So Bruce talked about subcommittees, and again, the not at all required. It's definitely an option. The key is that you really make sure you have working committees, because if you just have committees for committee's sake, it ends up not being all that productive. And depending on the size of the LFCC may be able to make a lot of these decisions. But at the same time, recruiting additional federal employees to get involved with the committees is a way of increasing engagement with the federal employees. On the marketing subcommittee, one of the things that we've done in the past, I don't know that we're doing it currently, but Bruce talked about having the stickers that the charities could put in their windows that says they're a CFC approved campaign. One of the things that I've always encouraged federal agencies to do, especially those that have high volume public traffic, to put on the bulletin board, Postal Service federal employees donated X amount, and just while people are waiting to get their Social Security card, if they see a little placard that says, we're proud of our Social Security employees who donated X amount of dollars, the people sitting there might go, wow, I never knew federal employees were so generous. And so it's just a way of increasing some of the public exposure And that's one technique that I think would be useful. And federal employees, just positive stories never get printed. So we never, at least in large metropolitan areas, we never see anything about the generosity of federal employees. We only see the bad. And so although we can't necessarily get the media to cooperate, we have control over our physical space. And so in our physical space, if we want to market or publicize the generosity of our federal employees, that's a really good opportunity to do that. And then we talked a little bit earlier about the oversight role of the LFCC. And one of the points I wanted to make is that although the PCFO works for the LFCC, the PCFO really knows the intricate ins and outs of the regulations. And although it may be an uncomfortable position to be in, there are times our PCFO says, good idea, but you can't do it. And so that's definitely, I'm empowering you all to tell your LFCC no if they're starting to go down a wrong path, because we definitely like the PCFO to help remind us to what the regulations require. Even though it's our job to oversee them, we don't live and breathe it every day because we're busy building missiles or whatever other agencies are doing. So it really is a partnership, and the PCFO can help the LFCC make sure that they're reminded of the regulations on a regular basis. And then a lot of the LFCCs have bylaws, and that's very helpful with recruiting LFCC members. It's sort of like the loaned executive position description when you send out the bylaws saying this is what will be expected of you if you agree to serve on the LFCC. And then we do the budget and oversight of that. And meeting minutes are the responsibility of the LFCC. And that can be interpreted a couple of different ways. Some PCFOs take the minutes, but the LFCC reviews them and approves them. Some LFCCs have the responsibility for the minutes entirely. That can be negotiated between you and your PCFO, but ultimately it's the LFCC that's responsible for maintaining them and approving them and making sure that they are accurate. And again, federal agency engagement is really the role of the local federal coordinating council. As Bruce said, only a federal employee can make the ask of another federal employee. Also, I know there's issues with when you do have a payroll issue, a federal employee has to make contact with the payroll office. I think the PCFO can't make that inquiry. So there are very clear lines in the regulations, and it's important that we follow them and that we work together as a team. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Bruce for pretty much the remainder of the session. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. If you have any LFCC questions, or we'll take some more at the end. And again, if you have any questions throughout Bruce's presentation, feel free to ask him, and that'll give him a break.
Okay, deep breath. Here we go. This is the fun part where I get to put the fear of OPM into you. Because as a PCFO, it is your responsibility to know the regulations, and not just the regulations. You need to know the memorandums that are issued, and there are several every year. And not only the ones that are issued this year, you need to know about memorandums and directives that may have been issued in previous years, because they still hold true and binding upon you today. So a great example is what we are affectionately call the Berry Directive from a year and a half ago, in which campaigns may no longer use any campaign money to provide food for any CFC events. So that's just one example of something that you won't find in the regulations, but was issued as a memo, and you're still responsible to make sure that you are following today. So I just want to really underscore how important it is to read the regulations and to know the regulations. And every year I try to go back and refresh my memory on what those regulations are, so that I can quickly answer questions and help make sure that we're doing things, by the book. So if you don't know where to find them, you go to opm.gov/CFC, and there's a link to the Code of Federal Regulations that specifically deal with the CFC. So download them, read them and know them. And if you're having trouble falling asleep at night, they will help you. So, but you still have to know them, okay? You need to, as Catherine said, you need to keep your LFCC informed of what's going on in your campaign. And one reason you need to know the regulations is so that you can make sure that you're preparing campaign materials that are consistent and abiding by those regs. Because as I mentioned earlier, you would be responsible for absorbing the cost of any reprint or anything that happens if for example, I've never seen this, but if you were to print a brochure and one of the agencies, one of the nonprofits had their logo attached to their 25-word statement or something like that, then that's a no-no. So also as a PCFO, you have to stay within budget. Shock. I know the government doesn't, but you have to do, okay? So if you go over, in fact, the regs even say that anything that you spend that's over 110% of the approved budget, the PCFO is responsible for absorbing the costs that are above that. So the LFCC may be generous and allow you to go 1 or 2 or whatever, up to 10% over your budget, but anything beyond that, and the regs forbid it. So just be very, very careful. Maintain a detailed budget list and make sure you know what you're spending and what's happening in your campaign. So that deals with understanding areas of financial liability. Develop safeguards for the PCFO financial liability. So that goes back to what I was saying about keeping a detailed budget and really line item. In our campaign, we not only have the master budget with all of the major categories, but the main one that we have to keep careful track of is what we call our campaign supplies line item, because there's a whole bunch of things that fall under that. There's awards, there's the printing of the charity list and the pledge form, there's the printing of posters, there's the incentive items that we offer for our donors. So there's really like 20 subcategories that fall under that, and that's where we're spending the most money during the time frame leading up to the campaign. So you should really be in close communication with your CFO and know what's being spent. Make sure that you are meeting those OPM deadlines as mentioned earlier. Make sure that you are notifying recipient organizations of their contributions, that you're dispersing funds according to the receipt of pledge forms. You have to make sure that you are giving federations and charities an opportunity to review the materials and to provide input on campaign activities and operations. And that is something that is actually a part of what we call the compliance assessment of your audit every single year, that you have to demonstrate that you gave charities an opportunity to provide feedback on the campaign. And so you can't just say, yeah, I called them up on May 15th and asked for their input, because you can't document that. So you need to be sending emails. You need to be having meetings where you're documenting and you've got a list of attendees and you're documenting that this was on the agenda. There are a lot of things that I just want to reinforce to you that you are accountable for as a PCFO for being transparent and making sure that you're doing your due diligence. Okay, so having scared you again, we're going to go on and talk about some best practices as a PCFO. Now, I cannot stand here and give you all 1,001 best practices for the campaign, but that's what the rest of the conference is for. So I'm going to go over just a few highlights. I talked about making sure that you have a campaign plan, and part of that plan should be communications, marketing, social media. We'll touch on a few aspects of those, but again, the nuts and bolts of your campaign is, are you getting great people as coordinators and key workers, and are you training them on how to make an effective one-on-one ask? So make sure you're setting and tracking goals and that the LFCC is involved in that process. Do everything you can to implement cost-saving measures. So you can, there's a lot of things you can do to try to help save money on the campaign. And one of the things that I would counsel you to do is to know what resources are available to you from your federal agencies. So, for example, our VA has been very generous with us in the past. They've got their own internal print shop, and to a point, whatever their budget will allow, they have been willing to print things for our campaign. They were willing one year to burn 100 copies of a DVD video that we wanted to make available to our other federal agencies. And we've taken advantage of graphic designers at Hill Air Force Base who have been willing to donate some of their time. So ask around and find out what resources are available, because if it's there at a federal agency or maybe even a charity who will be willing to help you, that's one more thing that you don't have to pay for out of your CFC budget. And the better steward you can be of those campaign dollars that are generously donated by federal employee donors, the more confidence and appreciation you'll receive not only from your LFCC but from donors who, many of whom, especially in the federal environment, are looking very carefully at campaign costs and expenditures. There's something about being a federal employee that you're hardwired to control costs very carefully, and I think that comes as a result of the culture knowing that that your agency is paid for by tax dollars. So having campaign kickoff events is a great best practice. It's a good way to launch your campaign, to generate some enthusiasm and awareness of what's going on. I told you about what we did for our campaign halftime show this past year as one example. You can do other special events, but just be very careful that anytime you're having a special event, you need to remember no food unless it's coming from a source that does not ever touch your CFC books in any way. And you even have to be very careful about sponsorships. And I won't get into that because there's a whole ethics track that you'll be attending later on, but make sure you attend that and you know the do's and don'ts of your special events. But you can do other things. We have a golf tournament every year in our campaign. We've done some other things that just have been an added bonus for as a way of saying thank you or appreciation for federal employees, and mostly generating awareness and enthusiasm for the campaign. Certainly try to facilitate speakers at federal agencies, and that's where your charities again can get involved. But not only that, I think a great best practice is when a federal employee can sit there and listen to a colleague get up and share an experience. That is so powerful. It makes such a difference to hear a coworker that you didn't realize battled leukemia earlier in life, or whatever it might be that they have overcome. To hear that story and to hear how the CFC or a nonprofit in the CFC was able to step in and make a difference in their life can really make the difference. If it were me, just to get personal with you just for a moment, a few years ago, and I had been doing the CFC campaign for 4 years at this point, and I thought that I got it. I was the guy, I saw myself as the guy who was raising money for charity. And that was my role, and I felt good. Pat myself on the back. Good job, Bruce. And then one day, I come home and find out that day my then 5-year-old son had been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. This was 3 days before our CFC kickoff event in Salt Lake City, by the way. And I spent those 3 days at the Children's Medical Center in Salt Lake with my son and my wife, mostly for the parents, us learning how to care for a child who had that disease. And in the course of 3 days, I'm here to tell you that our lives were impacted by 3 nonprofit organizations, all of which participated in the CFC. The first one was the medical center itself. They are a charity care hospital. They will not turn any child away for inability to pay. Now, we were in a very fortunate circumstance where I have insurance. We were able to pay and meet our obligations. However, it was very reassuring to me to know that that resource was available even if we'd been in indigent circumstances. So that was day one. Day two, when we were there, here comes a person to our room with a big blue backpack, and inside there was a teddy bear for my son, a DVD, coloring books, resources for us as parents to learn more about caring for a child with diabetes, and that was provided to us free of charge by the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, which is a CFC charity in our list. And I didn't understand how this was just magically given to us. It came because of donations. The third day we were there was a gentleman going room to room with this ginormous sheepdog, and he was visiting the kids. Many were there for various reasons, and it was just for 10 minutes or so, and he came into our room. My son Riley pet the dog and asked the gentleman questions about it, and it was just 10 minutes of completely taking his mind off the fact that he now had to be poked in the finger 8 times a day and have shots 4 times a day or what have you for diabetes, and just to see the spirits of the children that were being lifted. And he turned out to be from Intermountain Therapy Animals, a group that uses animals for that very purpose, to help brighten the spirits of folks at convalescent centers and kids at children's hospitals and things like that. Totally free, totally provided to us as a free resource, again, thanks to donations. And I went to the CFC kickoff event as a new man that day. And that day I was able to stand up and say, I get it. I get it. I know what the CFC is about, and I'm so thankful to people like you who raise money to help others. And it was a life-changing thing for me. And that's the kind of experience that I'm just sharing with you to illustrate it. That's the kind of thing that makes a difference and really makes people warm up to the fact that somebody's coming to their office and asking them for money. Because you're not asking for yourself, you're asking for the 4-year-old boy who suddenly got diagnosed and his life is about to change. Okay, moving on.
I'm crying. You're making me cry.
It's really funny. I've told that story now about 20 times, and I get choked up every single darn time. Okay, definitely schedule meetings with staff to make sure that they understand what the campaign is all about. When I say staff, I'm talking about agency leadership. So those CEO calls are very important. And I'm sorry, we're a little bit redundant here, but it's just to reinforce to you the best practices, the things that are most important in the campaign. So train. That is so important. Your job as a PCFO, again, you don't make the ask, but you need to make sure that coordinators and key workers feel empowered to know how they can approach their fellow key workers and make that ask. And in our campaign, we publish a 1-page document called How to Make the Ask, and it provides best practices for how to approach somebody and make a non-aggressive, personal ask. And the way that it starts, in my opinion, is that you've got to share your story. I think everybody has a story to tell, whether it's theirs or their mother's or father's or some way. Everybody in some way or another has been impacted at one point in their life by a nonprofit organization. Maybe you're an adult in full health and you think, I've never had to go to the hospital or have one of these charities, but do you ever attend community theater? Were you in the Boy Scouts or the Girl Scouts growing up? Do you enjoy the public trails that you walk on? So many of these things that we take for granted are provided to us because of nonprofit organizations. So everybody has a story to tell. Everybody has a passion that has something to do with the nonprofit. You find that passion. You explain to the person that I'm here today because this makes a difference in my life, and I'm not asking you to give to my cause. I'm asking you to see if maybe I can help you find a cause that is near and dear to your heart that you can support through the ease and convenience of payroll deduction. Let me show you how. Interns. Do you live near a local university or community college? They are always looking for internship opportunities for their students. And what a great opportunity for them to come in. You can kind of treat them as a pseudo-loaned executive as long as they're not making the ask, because that's only a job for a federal employee, wagging my finger at you. But they have skills. Maybe they have graphic design skills. Maybe they have computer skills, some website, whatever you might need. Look for interns locally who can help you out with that. And do try to find some loaned executives while you still can. Okay, I got a little confused earlier. The calendar of events that I was showing you in a previous slide was actually the OPM calendar of events that they publish at their website. This is just a snapshot of what I was talking about earlier. This is my own internal calendar of events, and now I know why my due date and notes were missing from that earlier. So if you want a copy of that, I'm happy to share. But everything I do, I can guarantee you I stole from another director at some point in the past. Okay, so let's take you through then sort of month by month, what should I be doing now? We're in February now, but I'm going to start with January. And that starts, normally the campaign, of course, closes December 15th. In a year when we have a federal shutdown like we just did, that due date was extended to January 15th. So some of the things that I'm normally doing in January, I'm actually doing now in February. So this is a good example. You got to close out the campaign. You have to make sure all of your accounts are balanced, that you've received what you've expected so far, that there are things you can be doing like sending out surveys to the coordinators that you worked with, asking for feedback. You need to make sure that all your electronic and hard copy pledges are processed and in your database. So whether your campaign works with ANDAR or CFC Assistant or another donor database, make sure that you've got that information in, and that there are clear lines of demarcation between, if you have a shared database at your PCFO, make sure there are clear lines of demarcation between what is the CFC donor database and what is the United Way or Health Charities or whatever database, because the last thing you want is for your PCFO to accidentally blast out a communication that includes federal employees who have said, no, don't release my name. So you need to notify the agency heads and coordinators of their results. This is the time when you're planning for, hopefully that you're doing this, having an awards ceremony to recognize and appreciate federal employees for the good work that they've done. You're sending out letters of thanks. You're responding to donors who want a letter of receipt for their donation. And you are ramping up for the upcoming charity application period. So this is the time of year when you're sending notices out to all of your nonprofits who have previously participated in the campaign, letting them know that it is time to renew their applications. And not only that, but it's a great idea to go visit the IRS Pub 78, is it? And look for other nonprofits in your area that maybe aren't participating in the campaign and should be. Another thing that we do is I send a notice out to my coordinators and say, talk to your fellow federal employees. Was there a charity that they were hoping to find on the list and they couldn't find? Let us know who that organization is. We'll make contact and invite them to apply. And it always helps to get in the door if you can say, hey, I'm contacting you because there was a federal employee or two or three at this specific organization that was hoping to be able to support you through the CFC. What's the CFC? Great question. Let me tell you all about it. So we've been able to get many charities in through making contact like that. Now is the time of year when you are also starting to plan for the upcoming campaign. So you're starting to make your campaign plan for 2014. You're starting to work on your budget for 2014. You're getting ready to present those things to your LFCC for the first meeting of the year. This is the time of year when your PCFO application is coming due. So every year, you as a PCFO have to reapply to serve in that position unless you have up to a 3-year contract, which is now, as of 2006, I believe, allowed under the regulations. So get that PCFO application ready and apply to be the PCFO again in 2014. Okay, let's see. Covered that, and I think I covered the budget earlier, so I think let's go ahead and move on to February. This is typically for many campaigns when the application period opens, so make sure you're notifying the charities of that fact. You're finalizing your budget for the upcoming year. This year, well, we passed this already, so hopefully you've now applied as the PCFO. I'm sure you all have. This is when the annual charity workshop takes place, where we are now. So I always have that in my calendar to come and attend, because this is where I get the best ideas that I like to take back to my campaign and implement. This is the time when you're getting ready to send the pledge and receipt reports to your charities. You are preparing for the final disbursement of the previous year's campaign. This is the thing about being a PCFO. You're not only working on the upcoming campaign at any given time of the year, there may be 3 campaign periods that are open. So you're working on the upcoming plans for the upcoming campaign at the same time you're finishing dispersing for the campaign that was, and maybe even preparing for the final audit for the campaign the year before that. So, audit preparations. This is the time when you're preparing for your awards ceremony for the 2013 campaign. And let's move on to March. March is the time, and I mentioned this earlier, mid-March is the date that you have to send the final designation and acknowledgement report to charities. This can be a little bit confusing to charities because for most of us, the practice is that you send them their first disbursement, which is due April 1st, so we'll talk about that in April. But from that first disbursement, you're also withholding the campaign expenses. So while your campaign expenses might be, say, 10%, you're withholding all of that from the first disbursement. So it makes it look like the charity is only getting 50% or so, that the expenses are higher than they are. So we try to make it a practice to very carefully, as part of our email to the charities, explain what they're getting and why it looks like more than 10% is being withheld. So I hope I'm making sense to you, but. This is also March is the time of year for us anyway when we are training our LFCC members, retraining them on what to look for in a charity application, because in March or April you're going to be meeting as an LFCC to review those applications. So you need to make sure they're refreshed on how do you review a charity application. You're beginning really now at this point of the year to ramp up your plans for marketing for the upcoming campaign. What are you going to do to make it fun and exciting? What new awards may you be implementing? You're setting the campaign goal. Make sure your LFCC is involved in that process because they have to approve the goal before you can just go out and communicate that. And then March is also the time by which you have to make the final disbursement for the previous year's campaign. And I'm not talking about the 2013 campaign you just ran. I'm talking about the 2012 campaign because you either pay out the charities monthly or quarterly, but by now you have to have reconciled all the incoming receipts and make that final disbursement to charities. So there's so many balls that you get to juggle as a PCFO. The good news is hopefully you've got support staff to help you with that. Okay, like I said, April 1st is the date you have to make your first distribution for the previous calendar year's campaign. So in 2013, we've now wrapped up that campaign. We're beginning to collect money from payroll deduction, where we have a holding account for all the cash and check and credit card donations that we've received already. That has to be all ready to go and has to be out the door to the charities by April 1st. And that's one thing, that's another item on the compliance assessment that you have to share with the LFCC and document that you made that disbursement by April 1st. So that's a crucial deadline for you to remember. By now you have reviewed, you've done all your pre-screening, your completeness review. Getting hailed. Ignore. Okay. For your for your charities. Denials have to be sent by the LFCC by certified mail. Well, you as a PCFO can send those letters, but they have to be signed by the LFCC chair. So they need to be sent by certified mail. So that is a safeguard for you because you need to be able to prove that you sent that denial letter. And there are specific criteria given to you by when, and it says in the letter, use the model letter that OPM provides, that they provide a model letter of denial. You just plug in the reasons for denial, make sure you you cite the regulation specific to the reason of denial, and then they have an X number of days to respond if they wish to appeal that decision. So their first appeal will come to the LFCC locally, and then if the LFCC decides that they have provided sufficient information, they can overturn that decision and accept the charity, or they can re-deny them, at which case the charity must then, if they wish to appeal again, they have the opportunity to appeal to OPM. And the OPM director has the final decision on all appeals. But this is the time of year when that is taking place. April 30th is the deadline in this year's published calendar by which those notifications have to be sent. Now, if they're accepted, correct me if I'm wrong, Curtis, but you may notify them by email that they're accepted. You don't have to send a certified letter, except in the case of a denial. But again, attend the eligibility training session. You'll get even more detail than you would ever want from how to do that process. Okay, this is 1417 is a fun number that you get to remember. That is I don't know what it stands for, but it's OPM's. What is 1417 anyway? Why that number?
1417 is the OPM form that is filled out.
Oh, thank you.
Supports
Okay.
previous year's results. So,
Do you want to use the microphone so that we could capture this for the...
Yeah.
Hello, my name is Marcus Glasgow. I work with Curtis Rumbaugh at OPM, and the charity registry is kind of my domain. Form 1417, it's OPM Form 1417, is the online tool. It's an online form that you use to report the previous year's results and participation and all that kind of good stuff. It's on the same system that you enter the charity data on. So we also refer to it as the charity registry. So they're sometimes used in CFC circles interchangeably, but the Form 1417 is for reporting results from the previous year, and the charity registry, which is on the same system, is used for uploading charity application data for applications that you're receiving at this time. Does that?
Yeah, I
help?
just wondered where the number came from was all. So I guess it was the 1,417th form produced by OPM.
Oh, that would make way too much sense.
Or something. But anyway, this is the, Marcus said, the charity registration system, and you go online, go to opm.gov/CFC, and you'll find a link to the 1417 where you can log in and report your data. And this is, and also this is when you're the time of year when they open it up, and you can begin to enter your charity information online. Okay, so moving on to May. You're now reviewing any appeals that may be coming in from any nonprofits that you may have denied. There is a technology report that you can start preparing, and I think it's due in June, if I'm not mistaken, to OPM, just to let them know what forms of technology you're planning to deploy to market and run your campaign in the fall. You're beginning to work with your auditor at this point to start. That May is when our auditor comes in and starts to go through the agreed upon procedures report that OPM issues. So there are certain steps the auditor has to take every year to make sure that you're running your campaign in compliance. So this is the time of year that you're working with the auditor on that. This is a great time of year to start recruiting your loaned executives for the upcoming campaign. I put in that May is also Public Service Recognition Week and Military Service Appreciation Month. So I'm throwing that in there because this is a good opportunity during your downtime to try to resurrect a little awareness of the CFC, because the lights are on and we're bright and happy and we're doing all our campaigning in the fall between September 1st and December 15th, but then things kind of go dark, and it's good to kind of try to keep the campaign top of mind. So we use this as an opportunity to say thank you to our federal employees again for what they do. So I just encourage you to flag that, and maybe you do a press release, maybe you're active on social media that week, maybe, I don't know, there could be other great ideas that you have or will get at this conference for how to take advantage of that. So in May, you're continuing to enter your charity data, because I guarantee you won't be done in April. It takes a long time. And this is also a good time of year for you and your loaned executives to make your agency head calls, to begin to reach out to heads of your federal agency and to solicit their support for the upcoming campaign. And by that I mean you want every federal agency head, to the extent possible, to be involved and supportive of your campaign. And what we do is publish a document called 10 Easy Ways CFC Managers Can Support the Combined Federal Campaign. And every single one of those 10 ideas is a non-time intensive, back to Catherine's support on limited, or comments on limited time available. But there are things like, they can send an email, they can quickly stand up at the beginning of a CFC rally and offer their words of endorsement, they can send a memo, things like that they can do to underscore their support for the campaign. And that really does go a long way. When federal employees know that the boss cares, it really makes a difference in the campaign. And we've had federal agency coordinators who have underscored this in response to a survey that we put out, where it was very clear the correlation between when they said, yes, my agency head was supportive, and yes, we had good results on the campaign. Okay, moving on then. June 3rd is your e-technology report deadline, and that's due to OPM. They will be issuing a memorandum, a memo to remind you of that and what is involved. It's a pretty simple form that you fill out and your LFCC chair signs. June 4th is the deadline for any local appeals to be completed by. So in June, you're continuing to make your agency head calls. This would be probably the ideal time for you to train your loaned executives, although I do see the date for this vary a little bit from campaign to campaign. But June is the time of year we try to train our loaned executives because we use them primarily to help with those agency head calls to get support for the upcoming campaign. So you'll be doing your LE training. You will be finishing up your audit in June, and you're beginning to work on your LFCC compliance assessment report. That's actually a piece of the audit. So there's the auditor does most of the heavy lifting for that, but your LFCC chair needs to be involved in reviewing your compliance with the production of the charity list, the pledge form, making sure you gave charities the opportunity to provide feedback, and a few other steps that are outlined in that AUP guidance that OPM issues. So this is the time of year to be preparing for that. The final audit, including the compliance assessment, is due in August, so you'll see that in a minute. And of course, you're still working on your 14-17 charity data. Okay, July. You're celebrating Independence Day on okay. July 1st is the deadline by which OPM issues the national international list. I think target date is the right word for that. The target date by which OPM hopefully has finished producing the national international charity list. Of course, they have an earlier deadline, so they have a little more time to work on that. And then your local appeals. OPM has a target date to complete review of any local appeals, any charities that may have appealed all the way to them by July 31st of that month. Typically, in our experience in our campaign is we usually have maybe one or two charities that have been denied that appeal all the way to OPM, so it's not usually too much of an issue, and by then we know the final answer, usually earlier in July. This is the time of year when you want to be finalizing that list and making preparations to get it printed. So I really would underscore to you the importance of working hard on getting your charity data into the 14-17. I'm speaking to PCFOs here, and getting that list ready, because if it's not done by the end of July, there's usually a backlog of PCFOs that are in line with the printer to get their charity list printed in time, unless you've got a printer that you're the only campaign they print for. But you want to make sure that you give them enough lead time to get that charity list ready and printed, because everything sort of hinges on that charity list being ready. If it's ready on time, you can do your trainings on time, you can pass out your materials on time, but if the charity list isn't ready, it makes things really hard. So work really hard. Make sure that you're right on top of that you're making it a priority, and that by the time the end of July rolls around, you've got your final list from OPM with their blessing to proceed. You've checked it with a fine-tooth comb every step of the way. You're submitting it to your printer. They're going to give you a proof, and don't just assume that they produced the charity list exactly as you sent it to them. One year we caught, our printer does a great job, but they sent the proof back to us, and there were some mistakes, and they had put the wrong CFC codes next to the wrong name of the charity, so the charity had the incorrect code, even though what we sent to them was correct, and we caught it, luckily. So you've got to be checking. You can't assume that what you sent to them is what's coming back is what you sent to them. So you're making sure your pledge forms are getting printed, and any other posters, any other things that you're printing, any other campaign materials. July is the time when you want to be getting, those graphics ready and done, and so that by the time August rolls around, you're basically ready to go come September 1 when the campaign launches. July 31st is the deadline by which your second distribution needs to be made if you're doing this. Now, we distribute on a quarterly basis, and my belief is that most campaigns are following that model. However, some are still doing the monthly distributions. So if you're doing the quarterly, then you need to have it done by July 31st. Also, I'm putting the August 1st deadline in here because that that'll catch you by surprise if you're not ready for your final audit and compliance assessment. You need to know that that has to be done in July so that by August 1st, you can present that audit report to your LFCC and they can review that. And that is then due to OPM in September, which I'll show you in a minute. Okay, August is the time when you want to finalize all your plans, all your materials need to be ready, all your incentive awards need to be ordered by then. We've got great vendors out here. Make sure you're talking to them. Talk to other campaigns to find out what they're doing with their CFC incentives. You'll get some great ideas. This is the time of year when you are training charities for if they're involved in any speakers program that you might have up and running. And this is also the time of year when you are at least planning and setting the dates for your campaign coordinator training. But if possible, if your charity list is ready on time, it's a great idea to train them prior to the September 1st start date. And I think a lesson learned from this past year is that the earlier you can get your campaign underway, the better, because you never know what's going to happen in the government, if there's going to be a furloughs or shutdown or something. It was a setback to us and to a lot of other campaigns to have that 3-week limbo period and then get underway after that. The charity registry closes in August, so you really got to make sure you have all your charity data in. Hopefully you've done this by now, but August is the time when it closes. So in September, it's funny because people say, oh, you must be really busy, or when they ask me in September, October, you must be swamped right now. And yeah, I'm busy, but I find that I'm actually busier the month leading up to the campaign than I am actually after the campaign begins, because by that time you've trained everybody and they're out there making the ask. And your job is to keep the website fresh and updated, to get track pledges as they come in. But September 1 is when the campaign begins. This year, September 16th is the deadline by which you have to submit your audit guide reports to OPM. So the results of your audit, your results of your compliance assessment, and there's a bunch of forms and documents that are associated with that audit. You need to make sure that there's a checklist of items that need to be submitted to OPM. And when they come in, I think it's Pat Roundel that checks to make sure every single one of those items has been submitted to them. And if you miss one, you're going to get a friendly email from Pat saying, looks like you've missed this document. So, and that's not the most comfortable experience. So make sure you get that to, she's very nice, but you know got to get it into OPM by September 16th. You may still be finalizing your campaign coordinator training in September. And September is generally the month when you're having your hoopla, your big CFC kickoff, and coordinating other agency rallies. How are we doing out there? You still with me? Everyone seems to be awake still. All right, October, campaign continues. Surprise. By October, I find that October is the month when the majority of my federal agencies are kicking off and running their campaigns. So if you can get everything else trained and everything else, all your materials delivered in September, you give them the best opportunity to launch their campaigns on time, and then your job is to be there for support. So you're doing your account management, you're following up with your loaned executives, you're in touch with your coordinators to find out how things are going and where you can be of support during this time of year. And then October 31st is the deadline for your third quarter distribution. November, the campaign is continuing. You continue to follow up with your loaned executives and your coordinators. You may begin, I didn't list this, but you may begin at this time to start making early plans for your award ceremony for the end of the campaign. This is PCFO payroll information due to OPM. Oh, this is the time of year when they want to know if you're going to have any changes to your CFC bank accounts or distributions that they need to know by November if you're like your deposit account for payroll coordinators or payroll centers is going to change. Usually it's not, but I have that in there because it's on the OPM calendar. So you're making changes to your website, you're doing social media in November. It's funny because all your campaigns will be in the thick of all your agencies will be in the thick of their campaign at this time. And yes, you are busy, you're responding to emails and questions and concerns, but the bulk of your work is actually earlier in the year in preparation for the campaign. In December, for us, that's when we're having our final LFCC meeting of the year. You're beginning to report to the agencies, letting them know how much money you've received from them. Many times your campaign coordinators will want to know, if they're using Employee Express, they need to know who has pledged online because they don't have access to that information. So it's your job as a PCFO, you have access to Employee Express and MyPay data that you can send to them. One of the vendors here has a tool by which you can upload your EEX and MyPay payment data, not your pledge data, into their online tool, so it'll capture everything all at once. You can talk to them. But the campaign closes in December 15th.
Bruce, before, I should have said this in November.
Yeah.
As an LFCC member, nothing is more irritating than in December to find out that you had problem campaigns. And so throughout, October and November, it's really important that you communicate with your coordinators and your loan executives. If there's agencies that are being difficult, if there's agencies that aren't responding, if there's agencies that are saying, oh, we don't do the CFC, tell your LFCC in October and November so that the LFCC can intervene and make that phone call and make a peer-to-peer contact. Because there's so many times in December we hear, oh yeah, we never got into XYZ agency, and I'm like, really? We're just hearing this now? Mm-hmm. So don't wait till December to alert your LFCC of problem campaigns, because the LFCC has a vested interest in the campaign succeeding, and they can put some pressure on the agencies that are not cooperating or find somebody that can.
And along with that, and thank you, that is a great point. If there are any unexpected budget expenditures, for example, you ran out of Eagle Awards and you had to reorder, keep your LFCC informed of those things in real time. I found out the hard way one year that they were slightly irritated with me when we had a higher than expected budget category item, even though luckily we were still overall under budget, so I didn't think they would care as much. But they really want to know in real time if you're going over on a budget line item. So they don't like, in other words, don't surprise your LFCC. They don't like surprises. So make sure you're keeping them aware of what's going on at all times. So thanks for that reminder. So December 15th is the closeout of the campaign. And you get a little busy this time of year making sure that your campaign coordinators are doing their due diligence to close the campaign, to make sure that they remember, because it has now been 3 months or more since you have trained them. Guess what? They might have forgotten what the procedures are for how to turn in pledge forms. Like, where do the white copies go? Where do the yellow copies go? Who do I send this to? What do I do to close out the campaign? How do I get my incentive items to my donors? So this is a great time of year to be following up with them, to be sending out your newsletters or end of campaign emails, re-explaining the process. If they're doing online donations, some online systems are tied directly to payroll, like EEX and Employee Express. Others, like CFC Nexus, are not. And it is the campaign coordinator's job to make sure that they are logging in and processing those online pledges, because they have to actually physically be printed and sent to the payroll office. So it's really important. December 15th is a really important date to remember, to make sure everything has been processed and sent to payroll, because if they send it in late, you're going to start missing out on money, because the payroll office may not have time to process those pledges in time for the first pay period of the following calendar year. and then you're dealing with shrinkage or pledge loss because they've missed that first payment. We had a really unfortunate situation this year. It wasn't due to us or the coordinator even, but the payroll office for one of our larger agencies had missed a step in entering the pledge data, and almost every single civilian at that agency did not have that money withheld from their first paycheck as a result. And they've taken steps to, they had to contact OPM, which said, okay, contact the payroll center, and if the federal employee personally makes contact, they can arrange to have that first paycheck's money restored, but if they don't, you lose it. So make sure the coordinators are on top of that. Okay, this is also data entry season when you're really fast and furious getting those pledge forms entered into your own CFC database so that you can issue the final campaign reports to your charities and to others who are interested. Okay, so that's in a nutshell, and really I've only covered the skeleton, again, the bare bones of the campaign calendar. So attend all your CFC meetings and plenary sessions, and you'll get even more detail on what is going on at any given point of the year. There are 3 websites I want to make sure that you are aware of. One of them, of course, is opm.gov/CFC. There you will find the regulations, the memos from past and current years. It's a great tool for looking up campaign information for other campaigns. You will find that donors will not always know which campaign they belong to, or I get calls from donors who are outside my campaign saying, I don't know how they get my name and number, but I'm in Montana. Where's my campaign? So there's multiple. So I go on to opm.gov/CFC. I put in Montana. There's a great campaign locator there. You can find out where the campaigns are, who the LFCC contact is, who the PCFO contact is. So opm.gov/CFC is a really good resource for you as an LFCC member or a PCFO member. There's also cfctoday.org, which hopefully you're all familiar with, because at this website you can download all of the presentations that will be at this conference. It is maintained by the CFC, that's not the word, it's the, Curtis help me, the National CFC Committee, because it used to be Foundation, that's the name, okay. The National CFC Committee, which is a conglomeration of charities involved in the CFC, and they have banded together and formed their own nonprofit called the National CFC Committee. It is a 501c3, and their mission is to support the combined federal campaign. So there are resources there for PCFOs, for LFCC members, for people attending this conference, and this has become a really helpful website with lots of good information and resources for you. CFCnexus.org is it's not an official CFC website, but it is the website that one of the main vendors that provides online pledging options for you, and tracking options and tracking tools and other. They've expanded now beyond pledging, but also they can help you with if you're interested in online charity applications and things like that. So those are just 3, and of course you should hopefully maintain your own campaign website. CFC Nexus is one of many vendors that can help you set up a website for your campaign. So some campaigns use them for their website, sometimes some use them for their website and their pledging, and so forth. Other resources for you. At this conference, your number one resource would be other campaign directors, if you're a PCFO, or other LFCC members attending the conference. So you will have the great opportunity to have breakout sessions during this conference where you can network with other CFC directors, other LFCC members. Take advantage of that opportunity. These conferences are so helpful. You go back well armed with tools and information to help you run your campaign. Definitely visit and take sneak peeks at other campaign websites. I do that constantly, and I'm always borrowing ideas from. We call it stealing, but nobody considers it stealing. It's just, you share best practices. So I share from other campaigns frequently. Social media is becoming more and more prevalent. I'm not going to get into a ton of that as part of CFC 101, but I am co-presenting later on a marketing panel where we're going to talk in more detail about social media and how you can use those tools. Seems like everybody is either on Facebook, Twitter, and more on Instagram and other social media tools. So it's an added resource, an added opportunity for you to forge relationships with your federal employee donors. Talked about other LFCC members already. OPM is a great resource. Each of you, depending on where you are located in the country, see if I get this right. If you're west of the Mississippi, Mary Capuli is your OPM representative. If you are east of the Mississippi and in the northern part of the United States, Curtis Rumbaugh is your representative. And if you're east of the Mississippi and in the south part of the United States, then Marcus is your OPM contact. So raise your hands, guys. And Louisiana and Texas is Marcus? Okay, so that is west of the, okay, sorry about that. So know who your OPM rep is, because that's the person that you will be contacting most. Anytime you have a question about the regulations or anything that you don't already know about the CFC, and yeah, I still call Mary up frequently, and she's like, oh, it's you again, Bruce. So, lucky me. Just a little bit on social media. I threw up there just for fun a couple of screen grabs from our. We now use Facebook and Twitter at Intermountain CFC, and we are starting to use Instagram a little bit more. And I'm hoping to add a YouTube channel soon. So I try to keep it light and keep it fun in the social media. One best practice is don't always make social media about yourself and about your own campaign. You need to be tweeting out and posting messages that are of general interest to federal employees in general, because nobody likes to hear other people just talk about themselves all the time. So just my little thing. Again, maximize today's workshop. So attend as many sessions as you can. Don't just sit in your hotel room. Sit somewhere new. Don't go back to the same table every time. And I really mean that. You will get more out of this conference if you meet more people and kind of expand. I'm going to preach to myself too here. You got to expand beyond the people you've already met and get to know other people, because there's so many. There's a wealth of ideas and tools and best practices out there, and you won't find out about them if you're always talking to the same people. Ask questions. There's no. I think Catherine would say that the only bad question is the question that doesn't get asked. By the way, I haven't had many questions here today. Shame on you. Go meet the vendors. Talk to, if you're new and you've been assigned a mentor, talk to that person, make contact with them, use them as a resource. And if you don't have a mentor and you want one, talk to Pam, get one. I don't know how helpful I can be beyond today, but I'd be happy to talk to you. And then take what you learn, make notes. I would caution you again from earlier, you'll be tempted to go back and implement 20 new strategies from this campaign. I think that's a little unrealistic. Stick with the fundamentals and then find 2 or 3 things at this conference that you think could really make the biggest difference, and focus on those things and try to implement those. At this point, that just about wraps things up, but I know that you have questions, and if some of you have written the question down, or something's burning a hole in your mind, and you've really you need, there's something you don't know, now's the time.
Well, and I'd also like to add, Bruce talked about mentors, and since I am one, and I see Christine is one, I've met there's a lot of reverse mentoring opportunities. Those of us that are older and grayer really need like fresh ideas and fresh perspectives, and we need to know what is of interest to the next generation of federal employees. And so even though you all are, the newbies, when you're in your workshops or you're in the plenary session, don't be reluctant to speak up, because you may actually have the solution to something we've all been grappling with. So just
Right.
because you're new doesn't mean you don't know what you're talking about. So feel free to speak up and share those ideas and those aha moments, and help us improve the campaign to better meet the needs of all the federal agencies. So
Yeah, thank you, because you guys bring a fresh perspective, and sometimes people like me can't see the forest for the trees because we're in the weeds, and it takes somebody who's looking at this in a new way, in a fresh way, from a different perspective, a different background. It can really be helpful. So don't discount your own ideas and solutions. So, who has a question? Here's a brave soul. Catherine will be happy to answer.
Hi, my name is Judy Nicholas, and I'm the LFCC chair for the King County, Seattle, Washington.
Okay.
And so I'm a first-year chair. And so my question, I was thinking ahead to the agency head visits. And I know that my PCFO has been in the biz for a really long time, and so has probably got
That's
some
good.
great ideas about that. But I'd be interested in hearing from you if there are kind of like, what one or two things should we be stressing as we go to those visits?
Do you want to take that first?
yeah, so Pam asked us to repeat the question, and the question is basically, what are the 2 or 3 things you should emphasize when you have an agency head visit? And I'll be happy to volunteer my PCFO to provide a sample template if you want one. And we just have a 1-page that has the 3-year giving history for that particular agency, number of employees, and then we reiterate the ideal coordinator of the 1 to 25 employees. So, we find out how many employees they have and say, so based on an agency of your size, you should have X number of coordinators. Emphasizing the point that Bruce made, in that the coordinators need to be passionate, they need to be committed. Over the years, there's been a tendency to sometimes send to the CFC some of the employees that may not be your superstars. And if you want your campaign to succeed, you need to let your superstars be free for a few months to work on the campaign. And again, a little bit of healthy competition. So if you can group maybe like size, even if you don't want to name the agency, you can just say of agencies that are in your same category as far as size or type, this is where you fall. You're either in the middle, you're at the bottom. And I've emphasized going to sort of low-performing campaigns, but we also make a point of doing personal visits to the really successful campaigns, and just go on a one-to-one and just say, congratulations, you guys obviously did something right. What did you do? Tell us what you did so that we can replicate this in other agencies. I guess that would be my emphasis, is that if they want the campaign to succeed, it's going to take a little sacrifice. They may have to free up some employees that they desperately need, and I guess that's would be what I would say. But the template that Demetrius has prepared is very good, and it's just a little 1-page snapshot of the campaign.
Yeah, we also have a kind of a checklist of things to do when you visit an agency head, and I'm happy to share that. I want to reiterate what Catherine said about not overlooking your great performing agencies, because I think as humans we sort of are hardwired sometimes to hone in on problem areas and focus on those, when really maybe we ought to be focusing on the bright spots. What is working? Who is having success? And how can I replicate that in other areas of my campaign? That's so smart.
Yeah, and one thing we did this last campaign, because we're so spread out right now, is we did I think it's a every 2-week newsletter that went out to all the coordinators, and it was sharing tips and tricks and best practices. We offered some additional career development sort of online self-assessment tools that would be useful for helping the coordinators, maybe identify their communication style, or so that it was would augment their professional development as well as make them better equipped to do the ask. And we had some like little status reports of some campaigns that were doing well and what they were doing to get their numbers up so quickly. Some campaigns have one of the challenges with the campaign cycle is that it's so long. And so some of the feedback we've got from some campaigns is that they just want to get it done. So they just, they launch it October 1. By October 15th, every employee has been asked, the campaign is closed, the paperwork's submitted, and that actually gets some pretty good results because you've got a really concentrated, focused 2-week period where it's all about the CFC. Because when it drags on and on and on, sometimes people forget to give by December 15th, or they're so sick of hearing about the CFC. So that's one of the tips that we shared in this newsletter with all the coordinators, and. But that little email newsletter was something we implemented this year, and it was good.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Hello, I'm Lisa Guthrie with the Central Virginia CFC. I want to thank you for some great ideas this morning. I hope we can find some of those if you're going to put them on the website or whatever, but enjoyed hearing about that. But it became apparent when you were going through some of your monthly assignments that when you were talking about putting together the budget, I realized I didn't really have a grasp on exactly how that funding process flowed, how the monies are realized from the campaign, and how you can project that to put together a budget. So if you can elaborate a little bit on that, I appreciate it.
Okay, sure. So the way the CFC works, and this will vary a little bit from PCFO to PCFO depending on the size and resources of your PCFO. I'll give you ours as an example. I work for United Way of Northern Utah, and they have enough cash on hand that United Way fronts the money for everything we do in the campaign. So we pay for the brochure, the charity list rather, the pledge form, all the printing materials, my compensation for any staff time, everything that is a campaign expense, United Way pays for. And then once we have the campaign is wrapped up and we're getting ready to make the first distribution in April for the previous year's campaign, we withhold 100% of what we spent on the campaign from that first distribution. So, and that is, to my knowledge, the way that just about every PCFO recovers their expenses. Now, some PCFOs may not have the cash on hand to do it that way. So in that case, they may get a line of credit from a local bank or credit union or whoever issues that line of credit. So they will pay for their campaign expenses using a line of credit, and then they will again recover those expenses from the first distribution of the campaign to include paying back whatever interest they owe on the line of credit for the first distribution. So does that fully answer your question? Okay, thank you.
Good morning. Thank you
Morning.
for all the information that you've given us.
Sure.
I'm Normal Gilchrist from the CFC of Greater Arkansas.
Hi.
And one of the things that I'd like to hear about is, with all the things that's went on in our workplaces and our federal workplaces this year, as new directors, how do we overcome the negative connotations that's going to be, hopefully not be part of our campaign next year? And I know that's kind of far-fetched, but I'm hoping that there's not going to be a bleed over from this campaign into the next campaign. But I don't want that to be a distractor from us as being proactive and innovative in the things that we do. So as you as experienced coordinators at FEB, can y'all help us with that problem? Or maybe it's not a problem, but an issue that I think may surface.
That's tough. I'm going to turn it over to Kathy.
You're going to help. So the question was, given the tough fall that we had last year as federal employees, how do we come back energized and have a very successful 2014 campaign? And it's sort of sarcastic, but we got so used to not having a pay raise that maybe we could encourage employees to give the 1% pay raise to the CFC. So we could start a 1% campaign. So because I lived for many years without the pay raise, so now that's bonus money, right? So we have a couple of, we just make it fun, and it's almost like the Field of Dreams movie, If You Build It, They Will Come. And, it's like if the focus is more on the fun, then the money follows. Because they get together, they hear the speeches, they, get inspired. But if it's fun, they'll at least come. And that's when they see the charities, they get exposed to the great work that they do. And we do a little... like Taco Tuesdays, where the federal employees bring in food and sell tacos in the cafeteria, and then that money goes into the CFC fund. We do, we're in an office, on paper I'm funded by Customs and Border Protection, and we're in an office that we're not allowed to wear jeans. So during the CFC campaign, we have Just Jeans Friday, and for $5 every Friday, you can wear jeans. And I always tell them, I'll give you $10 if you let me wear sweats, but they haven't gone for that. So, we do the same thing during the food drive as well. If you bring in 5 canned goods, you get to wear jeans, and so it gets expensive, but it's really nice to be comfortable on Fridays. So there's a lot of things you can do to make it fun and make it more about the camaraderie and the celebrating federal service, and just always reminding them of just how generous that we are and how lucky we are. I do think it was interesting those first few years after there was significant downturn in the economy, a lot of the campaigns actually saw an increase, because I think a lot of us were counting our blessings and realizing that, but for having a good government job, we could be those people losing their homes or not having insurance. So I think reminding people how lucky we really are. And what's interesting is some of the lower graded employees are the most generous. Postal Service just always amazes me with their generosity, and thank you. And part of that is because they're in the neighborhoods every day. They see some of the situations that people live in, and so the more you can sort of reinforce that positive, like when you tell people how awesome they are and how generous they are, they're going to be awesome and generous. So really just focus on the positive. My mother used to always say that your attitude determines your altitude. So just focus on the positives. And last year was over. There's no place to go but up. 2014 is going to be a really good year. And even some of our campaigns, when they were coming back flat, I kept going, well, flat's the new up. If you're flat, that's awesome, because most campaigns aren't. Yep. So there's, especially, people in Washington, they know spin. So just spin the campaign to make it fun and positive and upbeat, and the dollars will follow.
I don't have a lot to add to that, really. I always tell our coordinators, if you're not making the CFC fun, you're doing it wrong. You've got to make it fun. I think our approach is mostly going to be to ignore what happened in the past, and if they want, if it gets brought up, we'll acknowledge it. Yeah, it's the reality. We're all dealing with it. But this is a new year, this is a new time, and I think focusing on appreciating federal employees for the hard work they do and the great things that they do when we did our halftime show, we called it CFC halftime show / Federal Employee Appreciation Day, and we did everything we could possibly to make federal employees who attended that event feel appreciated, and we hung a great big banner that said nothing but "Thank you, federal employees." So expressing appreciation, keeping things positive, and making it fun. I think those are phenomenal ideas. Yes, sir.
Hi, good morning. My name's Kevin Reedy. I'm with the Central Ohio and West Virginia campaign. I'm a first-timer
Go
here.
Mountaineers.
All right.
PCFO or LFCC?
PCFO.
Okay.
And it's my first time. I started in August of last summer, so I grabbed onto the reins and held on tight. The last question was a great one and a big one as well. Mine is a little bit more defined. I was wondering if I could get some feedback on a good time for a kickoff, because there was a discussion, an online kind of open forum discussion about how the campaigns were doing in early January, And it seemed like the campaigns that started in September were my takeaway was the campaigns that started in September had a little better response and better performance. In our particular situation, we were planning on starting in September, but due to a couple different issues, we kind of pushed it back to October, like when you did. Our campaign kickoff was October 3rd. And so, but what ended up happening to decide that was the decision was based on the end of the government fiscal year. Yeah. And we talked ourselves into it that, well, that's really the best time to do it. Well, we can kind of talk yourself into whatever you want to believe. And so, is there kind of a real framework that if you can get the thing started by the end of September, you're going to be in better shape? Or is there a real sense that you'll get more focus if you're in that short time period after the end of the fiscal year? Thank you.
Good question. I wish I really knew the answer to that. I'll tell you though that we saw and experienced the same thing you did, where we were caught, probably shouldn't have been, but were caught off guard by the shutdown. And we have had kickoffs in September in the past, and for the past couple of years we'd done it in October because we figured, well, most of our federal agencies are launching in October, so we'll just kick off the same time that they're kicking off. And in hindsight, I wish that we had gone back to September, because we also saw, although not many did begin in September, the ones that did better. And I think it's because, all the, hadn't hit the fan yet. And those agencies had higher, better morale, is my take on it. So I think knowing that, hopefully the government has its act together a little bit better this coming year. The fiscal year still ends September 30th, and we don't know what's going to happen with funding for come October. So we're going to push for an earlier kickoff this year. That's all I can tell you.
I think there is any one right answer. And part of it is, I think we're sort of reeling from the shock of the shutdown. But to put it in perspective, it hasn't happened for 15 years. So hopefully, knock on wood, it won't happen for another 15 years. But the end of the fiscal year, it can be a very busy time for federal agencies. They're closing out their books. So that we have those same discussions, and you do get sometimes less turnout because everybody's got their end of the year activities if you have them in September. It also depends on the agency. For instance, Postal Service has some unique issues with regard to holiday packages, so they want to get theirs started earlier and done before the increased shipping. I don't know that there's any one right answer.
That's the best I can do.
Any other questions?
All right.
Any objections? Oh, do we have another question? Good, okay. Because we still have 18 minutes. Nobody's leaving the room.
Multiple questions in. My name is Rusty Lacoste. I'm new as the PCFO in Central PA, and my question is, how do you find those people that are passionate? Because where I'm at, I've been told that a lot of people just do it because they're voluntold to do it, and they've been doing it year after year. Since I'm new, I'm hoping to bring a new sense of energy to the program, but how do I find those people that are passionate about it?
So the question is how to find the passionate coordinators, and I have a thought, and I'll let Bruce elaborate. But so one of the challenges with getting the coordinators is that we send the ask to the agency head, and then the agency head asks the next level down, like, well, who can give up somebody? Who's going to do this? And so part of it is trying to, from sort of a grassroots approach. And, when you talk to frontline employees and they seem interested in the CFC, you can say, like, hey, this is when we're going to ask the ask of your agency. If you ask up, because I'll tell you, if an agency head had an employee that maybe forwarded an email and say, like, hey, FYI, I'm really into the CFC. I know this time of year you're going to be asking for coordinators. I'd love to be considered. If they went up their chain of command, of course. That makes it easy on the agency head because they don't have to voluntold somebody. They don't have to sit and look at the list and figure out who. It's like, oh, they've got a ready volunteer. Social media, I think, is one way to find those people. you could start posting on a Facebook page like, hey, anybody's passionate about the CFC, we just sent this letter to your agency head. You know, if you're interested, you might want to alert your supervisor that you're interested, or I don't know, but just it has to be sort of a grassroots, top-down. You know, they certainly can't do it without the agency head's permission, but the agency might not even know of the gem that they have. You know, the mail carrier who's very involved with the CFC. So publicizing, getting the word out, social media would be a good way to do that.
A couple of thoughts. On the pledge form, whether it's printed or online, you can ask for, put a little box that says, check here if you're interested in volunteering or helping out with the CFC. And hopefully your database then can run a report for you at the end of the campaign with a list of those individuals and where they come from. And then you can reach out and see, you know, would being a campaign coordinator be something that would be of interest to you? And that for us has been a good way to not only approach the agency head, but say, hey, the following list of people said they were interested in volunteering. Would one of them, you believe, make a fantastic coordinator? Another thing that Catherine mentioned earlier, that for loaned executives, which would also work for coordinators, is to position it as a career development opportunity where they can gain some extra skills, and the agency head can maybe identify some of their rising stars, and this would be a good opportunity to help develop and bring that person along to enhance their skills and make them an even better federal employee for the workforce later on. So when you make that ask, present to the agency head kind of a snapshot of what you're looking for in a CFC coordinator. We have a little one-pager that says profile of an outstanding campaign coordinator, and just a little bulleted list of what we're looking for. And it's not, you know, GS 12 or higher. It's nothing like that. It's, do they have a passion? Are they well respected and liked among their peers? Boy, that's like the number one thing probably. And are they energetic, dependable, and do they have a passion for nonprofit? Now, they may not know the answer to all those questions, but the first couple of things will get them thinking, yeah, who's a rising star in this organization that I can tap into? And remind them that it's going to, you know, reflect well upon them and their agency, you know, as a whole, especially in an environment where the media only prints the negative stuff. The only time you hear about a federal employee is when something bad happens. But, you know, this is a good opportunity for us to showcase the good that federal employees accomplish. Okay. Any other? Oh, question?
Hello, and thank you so much for everything. I'm Lori Jefferson from the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, PCFO. I don't have a question. I just wanted to add to the lady's question about getting all those voluntold. At our training, I am new, but I have gone through the training of coordinators this past year, and one of our big things was we had everybody in the room at the very beginning of the session, okay, how many of you are voluntold? And here they all are. I tell you what, by the time they left, some of those voluntold, we turn them around into super CFC volunteers. Yep. And I think that is possible in your training. So as my first experience, I saw it happen face to face. You know, the people that are looking at their phone the whole time, and then once you start really engaging them in the training, and after we did the are you a voluntold or a volunteer, the next question we like to ask is, hey, everybody in here who knows somebody who's been unemployed or injured, have a major illness in their family that they're dealing with, well, everybody in the room raised their hand, and it was like, boom, here's your meaning. So anyway, just wanted to throw that in there. I thought it was a really great way, and so I definitely plan on copying that in the years to come.
Well, and thank you for reinforcing my brilliant point that you all have really good ideas.
That was not, I cannot take credit for that idea, but I saw it in action and it was brilliant.
Yeah,
so
that's beautifully said.
Anyway, and so good luck turning your voluntold into volunteers. It can be done.
Yep, because no matter what you do, you are going to get some voluntold. No matter what you do, you're going to get people who get dragged into it kicking and screaming. And there is an opportunity to, if you bring the emotion into the campaign, the last thing we want is for the CFC to be this kind of sterile, boring email-based campaign or whatever. And you've got to be able to sell the emotion of the campaign and sell the results. This is what can happen when good people make a difference. That I can't really say it better than you did. Thank you.
All right. Any objections to letting you out 11 minutes early? All right.
Thank you so much.